Watergate scandal continues to grip the nation as the infamous 18.5-minute gap in the Nixon tape.
There was a tape.
Yeah, this tape was never subpoenaed. Why?
Nobody knows it exists.
I think the best course of action is that I take the tape.
I give you this tape, you splash it all over the cover of the Times, it gets traced back to me in a heartbeat. You win the Pulitzer and I get indicted. No.
I think there's a motel nearby, the Silver Sands. We go there, we listen to it, we leave.
Off season. Anything is possible, young lady.
I don't know how, but they know we're here.
Hey, who is they?
Could be anyone. Could be the FBI, the CIA, KGB. Could be a post reporter for all I know. We need to listen to the tape.
You know what to do.
Who is it, dear?
Oh, it's a newlywed couple.
We brought our player from home and it was broken. We were wondering if we could borrow yours.
18.5-minute gap.
Maybe. No one is supposed to hear it.
What is happening? What is happening?
Nixon.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness.
Can't let this Watergate thing get out of our grip, Bob.
It's a drag.
Like this, Al? I pushed the right two buttons, right?
Is that the news? Are you listening to Nixon?
Soak it up. It'll soon be over.
Well, that's no good, Al.
I want to be remembered, Bob. You will, sir. You will.
Boom, there you go. That was the trailer for 18 and a half, arriving on video on demand and digital July 5th. I am Kuya P. This is Nerds Rule the World. And as you see on the screen, I have a special guest, the director and co-writer, from what I understand, Mr. Dan Mirvish. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, Kuya. Great to be on, man.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much. So as a host, actor, filmmaker, I live in the DC region. Here in the Washington, D.C. area. So, and I'm very connected into politics, as it were, by just virtue living in this area. I also come from a long line of teachers and government workers, military. So I'm very familiar with the Watergate story. And I was very intrigued when this announcement came out from Shinehouse. Shout out to Team Shinehouse. I really appreciate those guys. But they made me aware. And currently with the January 6th hearings that we have going on, it's amazing how, if we just show people the trailer, how timed that story from Watergate into now it's still a thing, which is kind of sad. But I'm very curious to your thoughts maybe upon that, and then maybe just giving us some background on to why you wanted to do this story as well.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's amazing how timely this is. I mean, just last week we saw the Cassidy Hutchinson, testimony which is and the subtext of that was, here's a 25-year-old low-level staffer in the White House, a young woman, who can drop a bombshell on and bring down a presidency, or has the power to do that and has the courage to stand up and do it. Well, that is the story of 18 and a half. I mean, that's how remarkable it is. I mean, our story is about a young 25-year-old woman working in the White House, a low-level staffer who gets the goods on Nixon. And in our case, she gets the 18.5-minute gap in the Nixon Watergate tapes and tries to leak it to a reporter. And it is very much her struggle about, does she have the courage to go through with this thing? So, yeah, I mean, it's remarkable how some things don't change at all. Yeah. But I mean, I worked in Washington. I lived there. I was on Capitol Hill for a couple of years working on, I lived on Capitol Hill and worked in the Capitol too. I was a speechwriter to a senator. And that was the thing that struck me, because I was about 23, 24 at the time, was, and this, like how so many young people are in Washington and have access to enormous power, and how they wield it is a test and a challenge that some of them run into. So that was part of one of the themes that I wanted to explore with the film. So, but I've always been fascinated by Watergate. I was a history poli-sci major. I knew a few people tangentially involved with Watergate over the years. So it was definitely something I wanted to explore. And then when I found out that a friend of mine, my friend Terry, owned this motel that's out on the tip of Long Island that looks like it's straight from 1974. And he'd use it for a lot of, it's a working motel, but he would use it for a lot of fashion shoots and music videos. But he said, no one's ever shot a feature here. We're closed in the winter. If you want to shoot a feature here, great. And we had actually just been talking about Watergate. This was literally the day after the 2016 presidential election. Trump had just been elected, and there were inevitable comparisons that one might potentially draw.
Yeah.
You know, how many impeachments could we possibly have? And so when I saw this great location, I was like, all right, let's figure out a way to tell a Watergate story in this location. And then it was a matter of finding the character, Connie, who could kind of draw us into that story. Yeah, that was it.
Amazing. I was going to ask you a little bit about how, your pre-pro was to come up with the story, or not exactly come up with, but adapt the story. So I would assume your years of working here and just being involved in this spectrum helped with that. And then along with, as a filmmaker myself, pre-pro, getting locations. So you had a connection. So that just helps a lot of the irons in the fire, as it were, when you're making a film like this. So let's talk about the casting. I was looking at this list. I was kind of like, you have some live action, you have the actors in here, but then some voice cast like Ted Raimi and Bruce Campbell. I'm a dead guy, so of course Bruce Campbell's going to take my eye. John Cryer, talk to me about casting this project and your lead in Willa Fitzgerald. I believe.
Well, the voice actors really came first in some ways. I wanted to work with Bruce on my last film, so I kind of knew him a little bit through that, and that schedule didn't work out. And he was originally going to play another part in this, and that schedule wasn't going to work out. And I was like, well, I'm not losing Bruce, So I was like, hey man, how'd you like to play the voice of Nixon? And that really struck a chord with him, because he, as a 14-year-old in Detroit, he grew up watching the Watergate hearings on TV instead of being outside playing baseball or battling zombies at that time, So he was a real aficionado of Nixon and Watergate, and he had just played Reagan in an episode of Fargo. And then he brought in his buddy Ted Raimi, and he and Ted had actually done some kind of Nixon parody stuff on a comedy album that they put together. So that was a natural. And then I knew John Cryer a little bit, and he came on board. And honestly, if you're casting as a filmmaker, it's a really easy commitment from an actor. Like, a couple hours voiceover sometime in a year and a half. Sure, yeah, I'll say yes to that, easy peasy. Little did we know that we would wind up shooting the movie. We shot 11 days of the movie in March of 2020. There would be a pandemic. We had to shut down for 6 months. And then we decided, instead of waiting for post-production and bringing all these guys into a studio at the same time, we're like, you've all got Zoom. We've all got Zoom. Why don't we use that and a couple decent microphones? And so we actually did all those voice sessions on Zoom, and right at the height of the pandemic, when everyone was in lockdown, because actors couldn't do anything else. So they were stuck. And Ted was in Canada, Bruce was in Oregon, John was in LA. So we were able to do it that way. But as you say, we have an amazing live action cast too. So we have Willa Fitzgerald, who a lot of people know now from Reacher, but we actually shot this before she did that. And but she's a fantastic actress and a wonderful person. And she showed up with her dog Goose, and because we all stayed at this place at tip of Long Island, and she was great. She came recommended by a filmmaker friend of mine, Lucky McKee, who said great things about her. And then John Magaro, who's right behind your head, our other lead. There he is. He had just been in First Cow, Kelly Reichardt's film. She had recommended him to me. And then, Richard Kind is in the film. He'd been in my last film, so I knew Richard, and it was relatively easy to get him. He's very busy, but we were able to get him. And then Vondi Curtis Hall came in at the last minute, who just blew us away. I mean, and such a sweet guy. I just saw the film with him a couple of days ago in Chicago, which was his first time seeing it, and he loved it. And just such a sweetheart to work with, and such a pro. And then Kathy Curtin came in, right before we started shooting. And then Sullivan Jones, who had just done Slave Play on Broadway, but this was one of his first films, so he came on board as Barry the hippie. And so it was a really fun multi-generational cast, and it was great to work with all of them.
Wonderful. Yeah, just such an amazing cast. With only a limited time frame, I've shooting, and because of the pandemic, were you able to get everything that you wanted from the scripts that you had put together? Were you limited in any way? Was there a particular set piece that went how you wanted it to go within the project?
Yeah, I mean, everything went perfectly, other than the global pandemic right in the middle of it. So because we had to take a 6-month pandemic pause or healthy hiatus, and then because we found out that in March of 2020, we were one of the last films shooting in North America, and I was like, what does everyone else know that we don't know? So we shut down, and then we had 4 days left to go, which we then shot in September 2020. And we were one of the first films back using the COVID protocols and with SAG and DGA. And during that 6-month gap, meanwhile, I was editing the film. I was editing, we had 80% of the film in the can. So I was cutting what we had. And that was great because creatively that allowed us to kind of tweak the script a little bit for those last 4 days. Luckily we never had to reshoot anything, but it allowed us to kind of say, oh, we need a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. We wrote a lot of music during that time because it's all original bossa nova music. And so we added a couple songs, and that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise.
Oh, sweet.
And scenes with like Sullivan Jones on the beach plays guitar at one point. Like that was, we just added that because it was fun. So I don't think there's nothing that the pandemic really held back creatively. We were able to get everything we wanted in the can. But there are some great set pieces in there, which there's a couple long oneers, one take shots, some of which were baked into the script, and sometimes you see which actors have which combinations of chemistry and know their lines really well and can sustain a scene for 4 or 5 minutes, and then you can play around with that but not be slavish to it. Like if it doesn't work, great, shoot some coverage. Don't waste your life trying to get a oneer that you can't get.
I hear that. So now you're moving forward with it wrapping. You're now it's opening to the world again, July 5th on video on demand and digital. You're also doing a little bit of a festival circuit, and I see it's been getting some buzz. So how has that reception been like for you as a creative, and now getting your project out there?
Yeah, no, it's been great. I mean,
amazing marketing that the January 6th hearings is occurring, and they had this surprise, staffer that came out the woodworks, which kind of ties in to with what you're doing. That's
exactly
wild and weird all at the same time.
But I planned the whole thing. So, but no, we started playing at festivals last fall. We played 21 festivals in 8 countries on 4 continents, and which has been a lot of fun. And most of them have been live. We kind of strategically played festivals during the trough between Delta and Omicron, and then in the fall, and then another 10 festivals in the trough between Omicron and World War III, and then we're in the midst of a 60-city theatrical release too, which we're kind of at the tail end of, and so that's why it's coming out on VOD on next week. But that's been great. I mean, we had a screening we've had screenings in DC and New York and LA, Seattle, Chicago, Omaha, Yakima, Corvallis. I mean, all kinds of interesting places. And people have really come out and seen the film. And, the nice thing about, coming out during a pandemic is if people wanted to see it in a theater or at a festival, they could do that. If they want to see it at home, now's a chance they can see it at home, and that's fine too.
So reception-wise, from the audience, coming back to you, are people connecting with the message that you wanted to convey? And now with what is occurring, how even more important this message is? I'm curious about that feedback.
Yeah, exactly. It's been really fascinating, and there've been people coming to the audience who there was one guy who actually was a legal intern on the Senate Watergate committee himself, back in the 70s, and he really loved the movie. So that's been interesting, talking to just discovering these people like that. But yeah, I think that the overall message of the film is one person really can make a difference if you stand up for what you believe in, and I think that really has been resonating, and this is the time to do it. But also, it's a comedy. I mean, this film is a thriller. It's a comedy. And what's great about seeing it with an audience is we've heard people laughing, because, normally in post-production, you would test a film but we didn't have that chance because of the pandemic. So really the first time I saw it with an audience was at festivals, and they and it was like, wow, people are laughing. I guess it's a comedy,
Yeah.
It's this mix of, it's speculative historical fiction. There's these fictional characters, but it's one woman's journey and following her character and these other couples that they run into.
I feel that. Yeah. As again, I live in this area, and you either laugh or you're going to cry when you're connected to things like this. So it's cool to choose laughter, and to help get over these things.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with Nixon and the Watergate tapes, it's hard not to be funny. I mean, working with Bruce as Nixon, I mean, he's not just doing a Nixon impersonation. It's really, you hear Bruce Campbell in him, and that's part of why I chose him, is he's got this innate sense of gravitas, but also irony and humor. I mean, you see it in the Evil Dead movies as well, and just this, the farcical nature of Watergate. I mean, they knew within 3 days that this thing was a farce, and they were just going to try to, and they kept just digging themselves in deeper and deeper and deeper, and that was the problem. But it's hard not to, take this a little bit, humorously.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it as a historical fan, and being in this area. I'm definitely curious about 18 and a half. And now with just the way the world is, how these compare, I'm going to suggest it to everybody I know, because we're tuned into these January 6th series. I'm curious about it for yourself. Have you been, this kind of wild marketing now happened and thrust upon you with this surprise staffer that comes out. Has that inspired, and are there anything else we can look forward to from you, Dan? I know you still have the amazing Slam Dance Film Festival, which is amazing. Right. Thank you for that.
No, sure. My pleasure. I co-founded that. Still involved with it a little bit. There's talk about turning 18 and a half into a play. Also, a little bit of talk of maybe expanding it into an episodic series, like a streaming series. So there's some chatter about that. And then the soundtrack itself is for sale. That's out on Spotify and iTunes already. So if you dig some kind of crazy original bossa nova, Tropicalia tunes, we wrote them, including one called Wonder Bread that literally tells the whole story of the movie. There's a whole Wonder Bread conspiracy baked into the film, as it were. And so that's all keeping me busy, and then we've got to get ready for the DVD and Blu-ray, and that's coming out in the fall. And so that's going to keep me busy for a while, for sure.
Wonderful, Dan. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this work. As a filmmaker myself, you want to write stuff and that can inspire, entertain, and educate, and make people laugh, all of that. This is that type of a project for myself personally. So I think you and I are cut from the same cloth, and I'm looking forward to enjoying this with my family, and hoping for a better world, and hopefully we can inspire with this stuff. And this is a real pleasure, Dan. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you, man. This is
definitely fun. Everybody, 18 and a half, opening on video on demand digital, July 5th. Check it out. Show love to my friend Dan Mirvish and 18 and a half, y'all. Kuya P, nerds rule the world.